Welcome to the Dean's Roundtable podcast series with Bridget Johnson. Each month, we bring you game-changing conversations about K-12 education and leadership. Join us as top educators, field experts, and administrators share actionable strategies to transform your school community. Let's dive in.
Welcome to the Dean's Roundtable podcast. I'm Bridget Johnson, the founder of the Dean's Roundtable, a space created for student life professionals to connect, learn, share, and grow together. Today, I'm delighted to have our first repeat performer. Aubrey Triptow is joining us again today to explore the critical topic of giving and receiving feedback in educational settings. For those who might have missed Aubrey's previous appearance, she brings a wealth of experience spanning from classroom teaching in Chicago to administrative roles in Austin, and now as a leadership coach working with educational leaders nationwide through the Gear Leader. Aubrey's unique perspective is particularly valuable given her instrumental role in developing Texas's teacher incentive allotment program during her time at TEA. Now based in San Antonio, Aubrey has expanded her impact by combining her educational expertise with health coaching, recognizing that effective leadership development must address both professional skills and personal well-being. Aubrey, it's a pleasure to welcome you back for another conversation. Today, we'll be diving into the art and science of feedback, something that's absolutely essential to growth in any environment, yet often challenging to implement effectively. I'm looking forward to tapping into your insights on this vital topic, especially during this time of year. For many schools and organizations, it's what we call contract and feedback time. So I think this is a perfect time to have this conversation. So welcome back, Aubrey. How are you?
I'm doing well, Bridget. So happy to be back. So thank you for having me.
Awesome. So let's just kind of jump right in it. What is feedback?
Yeah, feedback is something that we receive all the time, and it's something that we need to grow. And it's just so vital in our day-to-day lives. And I think it's something that scares people a little bit.
I think it scares people all the time because I think we're so formal about it oftentimes. And so now I need to give you feedback instead of creating environments where it's kind of comfortable to have that give and take. And so it doesn't feel like it's just like monumental thing that's about to happen. And so as someone who's been both a classroom teacher and administrator, how did your perspective on feedback change when you moved from receiving it to primarily giving it?
Yeah, it was definitely a shift. And I think it was a good thing that I had started receiving it before I was the one providing it because I knew how it felt. And so, therefore, I knew how I can tailor it to make sure that that person received it and really understood my feedback because I think that's
Mm.
another aspect of like not really understanding it. So, I will say, like, I'm happy that I was in that seat before the other one.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
That dynamic changes. So you having to think about it's not as easy for someone to give upward feedback. And so how am I going to make sure that that person feels comfortable and build some structures so that they feel that they can give me that feedback and that I'm open to it as well.
Yeah, and so one of the things that you just said that kind of sparked something in me is like people, have the feedback to give, but don't necessarily know how to give it in terms of like each person's a little bit different. People receive feedback in different ways, and sometimes we don't account for that. And that
Yeah.
is super important to understand who you're giving feedback to and how are they most comfortable receiving it. Now, all feedback we know some of it's not so easy to kind of take or receive, but it's worse when you're receiving it in a way that is not kind of who you are, kind of in the fabric of who you are as a person. And so there's some people who say, "Give it to me straight, right? I don't need you to kind of massage it. I don't need you to like put flowery message language. I don't need you to sandwich it in between two
Yeah.
different, compliments. Just give it to me." And other people need some other things, and so um, I think sometimes we get nervous because it's also nerve wracking on the giver side to, have to give this feedback back to people. And we just kind of go straight in and kind of plow through it without being sensitive to it. So I think that's an
Yeah.
important thing that you noted.
No, absolutely.
So, oh, no, go ahead.
So that leads me to thinking about like just like you said, how we don't tailor our feedback. And I think something that we miss so often is like, leaders or not, is just asking people. Sometimes,
Right.
like, how do you best like receive feedback? I will say that as a teacher, you know, I didn't like when people were like busting in my classroom, telling me feedback straight to my face in the middle of my lesson. But actually, that got something that like it became something I was more comfortable with. Like, hey, slip me a
Mm.
note, whatever it is. But like some people, like really, it will throw them off. So just asking them, like, hey, is that something you want me to like really practice with you, talk with you in a one-on-one setting? Is it something that you want in writing? Is it something that you want in the moment, super direct, like no fluff, like you said? Just ask, just asking. I think then also like builds that foundation of, or begins to build that foundation of trust.
Absolutely. And that trust is so important. That's another thing that really helps when
Yeah.
you are giving feedback. If you've established that relationship or that psychological safety is a term that I like to use, it really makes things a lot easier. So, during your time developing the teacher incentive allotment program at TEA, what did you learn about creating feedback systems that actually motivate rather than discourage educators?
Yeah, I think a lot of that is like number one is just knowing that their feedback mattered. So I think in every like role I've had is like if I'm going to ask for this feedback, like I'm going to have to implement or like show that it's valued or like demonstrate that it's being used in some way. So I think like that's a huge piece of like, hey, we asked for the feedback, right? Like it's
Right.
survey, like great, check. But it's like even if it's the smallest bit of feedback, like I remember after summer PD, like during summer PD, getting like the AC is off. It's a little hot in here, whatever. The next day I made sure AC is, but I also said it out loud, like, hey, I respect your feedback. Thank you for that. I made a change. And so I think especially when you're working for like something like TEA is like letting them know that we're not just asking you and making you feel valued, we're actually using that and implementing it in some way. And so I think that's also an aspect of feedback that we sometimes lose.
Yeah, and so, kind of in that same vein, we talked about not tailoring feedback as being a mistake. But what other common mistakes do you see with leaders when delivering feedback to their teams?
I think one is just not delivering it at all. Uh,
Yeah, that's one.
that's I think it's like you would be mind blown about the amount of people that I speak to that just can't do it, and or they feel like there's gonna like it's just gonna be too awkward or whatever, and I can do X, Y, and Z, or I'll send this email that's like cryptic and whatnot, but it's like
Yeah.
feedback would avoid so much. So I think like that's a huge thing that I think it's like we're all adults here, but it really is hard for people. So like giving it, just actually giving it, and then making sure that you're thinking through the feedback beforehand. Like what do you actually want that person to receive, and like making sure you're in the right mind. Like you're not giving some feedback in the heat of the moment or in a way that you wouldn't
Mm,
appreciate being given to you. And so again, I think it's being really like thoughtful about it and making sure
mhm.
that it's clear, and then even just like asking the person like, hey, what did you hear when I gave you that feedback, um,
Yes.
to make sure that they actually understood it. And I'll be honest with you, sometimes I'm so taken aback by feedback at like that I wasn't expecting or whatnot, and when the person asks me like a follow-up question, I'm like, I will get it totally wrong because I'm like, you're saying this, and they're like, wait, that's not what I meant at all.
That's not what I meant at
Like
all.
there's some just like a simple question, be like, hey, what did you hear when I said that, or like what did you take away from that, is
Yeah,
also really
because nerves and stress can also, cause people to kind of black out for a minute, right? So they didn't even really hear what you said. And so they're like sitting there, like they're imagining the worst. And then, asking those clarifying questions and making sure that the message that you were trying to convey actually gets across is so important. And that's not often what happens. And that's even like giving directions for something, right? And like, what do you think we're supposed to be doing right now? And it's amazing to me how so many people have a different perspective like, I actually didn't say that at all.
yeah,
And so wanting to make sure that you
actually,
are the message that you are trying to convey is actually the message that is what's landing. I
yeah,
can't tell you how that important it is,
yeah.
how important that is for sure.
Yeah. And then I think another thing is just like letting them know why you're giving it. And again, I think this starts at the beginning of the relationship. But one of
Hmm.
an amazing colleague I worked with a long time ago, we had talked about feedback a lot. And she's like, I want my people to know that I'm invested in them and I care for them. And that is why I'm giving feedback. So I think if you go into it with that mindset of like support, just the way you deliver it will be different. And so that's something else
Absolutely.
I also see as a gap going in is like, why are
Mm.
you giving this feedback?
Yeah,
And
is
people,
it because you're gonna put me on a PIP and then I've got 10
yeah,
days to improve? Or am I getting fired? Like,
yeah,
it's so awful that people kind of equivalent. What's the word I'm looking for? They
feel-
think that the equivalent is, when you get
yeah,
feedback, you're getting fired. Is that the word? I don't even think. I'm not sure, but we'll go with the equivalent of being fired, right?
yeah.
And
Yeah.
so,
Or like I think it's like because we really have all probably received feedback that was, something super strong. And you can tell by the way people like, even think of the term feedback when they hear it. You could see almost like a visceral response, like, "Oh, I have some feedback for you." If it's again not something that has been built into a structure or something that they've had practice at or whatnot, like it could be triggering them to 10 years ago. So you really have to think through that as well.
yeah, absolutely. I don't think people think about that enough. Like, it's not just about you delivering the feedback. You've got to kind of take in consideration who's receiving, pay attention to body language and what's happening, facial expressions, because are they matching what they're saying? Like, they say they understand, but do they really look like they understand? All of that definitely plays a role for sure.
Yeah. And that kind of
Um,
makes me think of like we're so, virtual and like sending emails and whatnot. And again, it's like being able to see how someone's receiving feedback is also like so important. So you can put it in writing like afterwards if need be. But, again,
yeah.
that human aspect is important as well.
Absolutely. So let's talk about cultural differences a little bit. So, how do cultural differences among educational institutions affect how feedback should be given and received?
Yeah, I think again, my go-to answer for I think a lot of this work is to know your people and to know, and to ask questions and to like build that foundation of trust so that you can truly deliver feedback that is like timely and like supportive and from a like a good place and is
Hmm.
helping them grow. And I feel like that alone is a big piece. And then you have to build a culture around your feedback, like as a leader. And so if that is something that you model as like something you can also receive, I think that also ensures that your team has seen a strong model of that, seen how you receive that, and then can therefore, act on that as well. If that, I'm not sure if that answered.
No, yeah, modeling is certainly important, and having a culture of giving feedback makes it almost, it's like lubricant, it greases the wheels, right? And so you
Mhm.
wanna make sure that you are providing, a space where this is not kind of this foreign thing that happens twice a year that everyone gets all worked up about. A culture of feedback is super important, and so with that said, you've also worked in different educational environments across multiple states. Have you noticed any regional differences in how educators respond to feedback, or are we all doing it the same?
Again, I feel like it is the main difference I see is if there are systems in place or there are not. And I think that's like the biggest difference that I've seen. And it doesn't even matter like what part of the country or even like the background of the staff. It's really um, it's very obvious like if the culture is set, if the person has like a one-on-one meeting where they know that there's a safe place to give and receive feedback, like that is very evident. And so I think like that is what I see is like if there, or even if it's an anonymous like survey, like again, that's
Mm,
still a system, still allows them to like make sure that they are giving feedback and their voice is heard. And also
right.
and so again, I think that's like the biggest difference I've seen is like not having a place for it or having a place for it. The
Gotcha.
third place is probably having a place for it and not using it in the best way, or
Mm.
using, or you have to make sure that your other leaders as well are bought into that same like mission of like of what we do with feedback and how we receive it and how we model that for everyone. So making sure that that's also aligned across the top.
It is, and one of the things that kind of struck me, one organization where I worked, is that the fact that we didn't have a kind of consistent way that we all gave the feedback, so everyone was doing it differently, and so it didn't. it didn't feel right. It didn't quite land
Yeah.
in the way that we would hope. Because if you're one person who says everyone's doing great, there's no room for improvement, everyone's 5 out of 5, everyone gold stars all the time, and then you have other people who are like, no, we're going to give you a little bit different type of feedback. We want to help you learn and grow. I want to give you some growth areas, but I also want you to do a little self reflection yourself and give some growth areas. That can create tension within an organization if you've got people working on different models of feedback. Can you talk a little bit about how important that is to be consistent across
Yeah.
an organization?
Yeah. I think it's also really important, and I've coached a few teams to actually like sitting down and coming up with like a plan for what that looks like for them. Because like you said, that inconsistency also just like you have to think about like what is that showing your staff? Like it's showing that there's some inconsistency in leadership, like it's speaking volumes. It's also showing like if we are going to say we value feedback, like receiving giving and receiving, we need to make sure that that's like evident. How is that evident? Like, what are we doing with it and thinking through that? But those inconsistencies are, again, how some employees may feel really awesome about their work every day,
Mm.
and like, and maybe it's not the strongest work. Like, maybe they're not getting feedback. Then you have this group that's actually has like, they're getting feedback, they're getting better, they feel supported. There's like that aspect. And then there's other groups where they are like maybe given some really harsh feedback and then feeling like
Mm.
they're not being supported. And so again, like that just inconsistency is what breaks down culture. And so much of like actually having a strong culture is that like a simple ability to give feedback and make sure all your leaders are understanding the point of that system or process or whatnot.
Yeah, and on the same page, right?
Yeah, and that psychological safety, right? That like
Yep.
they know that no matter who's giving them that feedback, in what meeting, it's like coming from a great place, a place from support, a place from a pushing to grow. Um, and yeah, I think they really do. People want to be seen, they want to be heard, they want to be valued, and like they want to grow, and that's part
Yep.
of growth.
Absolutely. So, as both an educate, sorry, I'm gonna start over because I just kind of tripped all over that.
There-
As both an education and health coach, how do you see the connection between personal well being and one's ability to process constructive feedback?
Ooh, that's yeah. I think that that emotional intelligence piece plays so strongly in there, and I think the stronger your emotional intelligence, is, the better you receive feedback, no
Mm.
matter what type of feedback it is. And I also think that you give better feedback because I think there's a self awareness where you're like recognizing your own biases and your own emotions within that work. And so I think that's key to thinking through that. And then just like self regulation. And that's
Mm.
also something that allows you to be healthy and not as stressed if you are receiving or giving feedback. You're not having like an emotional impulsive response. You're taking a
Yeah.
beat after the feedback, letting it process, maybe even repeating it back, whatever that may look like. And that overall just like empathy for people. Like I knew what it was like to be a teacher. So as a leader, I'm not going to, bombard someone with 10 pieces of feedback, or whatever it may look like. Building that relationship a little more. So there is respect before I give it. And that's like, again, that relationship piece, which goes back to, I think, being emotionally intelligent and just also like when you are receiving feedback, you have to have that growth mindset. And so I
Yep.
think even when I am like, whether it be coaching someone in education or in health, like there's a lot to think through. But I think the stronger you are emotionally, you're able to give and receive that feedback in a way that's like actually, and also like sometimes you're going to get feedback that actually doesn't, it's like super harsh and maybe vague or not, helpful at all. And you
Yeah.
know that.
Not helpful.
And like, and I think like the more like centered you are on receiving that feedback, and like I think that's also helpful to know, like, thank you so much for that feedback. The end.
Yeah, being able to process that. Well, I'm going to put a pin in that. We're going to come back
Yeah.
to that because I think that's super important to talk about in terms of kind of what you do with the feedback that you receive.
Yeah.
But before we get there, we haven't really talked about, the difficult feedback that you have to give to people who are resistant. And so that's, I think, people's biggest nightmare. Like, it's fine. Like, if you're able to kind of go in, you know what you want to say, you're able to say it and kind of just move on from the hard, the difficult feedback. But what if you've got someone that is kind of historically difficult? You know that they are just going to push back. You know it's going to be a hard conversation. What are your strategies? What do you do in those instances?
Yeah. I would say the first thing that I like to do is like instead of actually giving them the feedback, again, this doesn't work always, but it's having them come to that conclusion on their own.
On their own. Interesting. Okay.
So again, that one's a little trickier, but it really does work. Like if you're like laying out all the facts, you're like, hey, what is the next step for yourself that you would like to focus in on based on X, Y, and Z? Sometimes like them coming up with it themselves, and
Mm-hmm.
they're more likely to accept that feedback from themselves. And so I know that sounds silly, but it's worked before. I
Mm-hmm.
also think that when like obviously thinking of the delivery itself and like what and just being straightforward about like how do you like to receive this feedback, and so if you're giving it the way that they said they like to receive it, and reminding them of that is always helpful. I think, and then there are those basic strategies where there's like the feedback sandwich, where you do put, that really positive, like genuine, like building that recognition and rapport about what they're doing well. Then you're giving a clear, bit of feedback that's more constructive, and then ending it with something that's like giving them back that confidence or showing that you're confident in their abilities to kind of motivate them to work towards that feedback. Um, I've heard another thing I've tried is like a glow and a grow. Like again,
Mm.
softens the blow a little bit, where it's like something super positive, making sure it's genuine, and then something more constructive. And then another one is keeping it very like factual and just like straight to the point, which is
Yes.
something, especially with those difficult people that like may like kind of like you're removing all emotion, focusing in on the facts. What is the specific situation? What is the actual behavior that you're giving that feedback on, and like what is the impact of that behavior or whatever it is you're giving them feedback on, and just like
Mm-hmm.
very constructive but straightforward and direct, and like there's really no like wiggle room making. And then obviously you want to make sure you have some, like if you're really giving that feedback and you've thought through it,
Mm-hmm.
having some examples in your back pocket or whatnot, because there has been times where I've been like, okay, thank you for that feedback, can you give me an example of when I've done that? Like I really do
Yeah.
like want to know, whether that be someone that's like actually not genuinely wanting to know, they're just upset that you gave them that feedback or not. But like as someone who's going to be coaching them and giving them feedback, you should probably have some really strong examples of when that's happened. So just being really prepared
Absolutely.
for the conversation.
Yeah, if you're dealing with facts, then you should have some things to back up those facts, some examples. I think that's super important. What do you do when, people come in, what I say, coming in hot, like they have come in, they've sat down in your office and we haven't even said a word yet. And they are
Yeah.
so worked up because they're in an environment where feedback isn't given all the time. You're just, maybe there's an organization who's just kind of getting started with doing this process. And so, obviously there's going to be some bumps in the road. People haven't had that opportunity to trust you because they haven't been through the experience yet.
Yeah.
Are there things that you would suggest people do to kind of take the temperature down before you even start to give the feedback?
Yeah. I the minute you had said that, it flashed in my mind like parents, like when they're upset,
Yep.
hot.
Coming in hot.
Yeah, I think it's like reminding them, like first, like, hey, we're on the same team, and then again,
Hmm.
like it has to be genuine. Like you really have to like think through, like maybe a statement you use or whatever your go-to thing. It was like, I'm invested in your growth, and I'm also not going to like just dump this feedback on you and leave. What can I do to help you to make sure that like
Hmm.
you grow? Like I want to make sure you grow. This is something that I've noticed, and I wanted to give
Yep.
you the feedback on, and like
Great.
kind of just reminding them that like we're on the same team,
Yeah. Yeah.
that I'm so invested in you, I care about you. Same with parents, when I was like we're on the
Yeah.
same
No,
team, I
absolutely.
really care about your kid too. Like surprise.
Yep.
But
Absolutely. So,
So
can you share a time when you received feedback that fundamentally changed your approach to leadership?
yeah, I have a few, but I will say, I I received some, oh, probably a few times, but one time that really sunk in that like I will have something set in my mind that I would like to do it this way. I think it's like a lot
Mm,
of us as leaders like have a decision we've made, and like we do want some input, but maybe not so much. And so one of the pieces of feedback that I received was that my team members felt like they were like cut short on something we were
mm.
discussing together because I had already made up my mind. And I feel like
Ah,
so much of my planning for the for the rest of my career was really thinking about like if I'm going to ask feedback, if I'm going to or ask for their input, I really have to like be willing to accept it and like and show them that I am and whatnot. And so I think that was like hard to hear, but also like if I'm just going to be as direct, I wanted them to be just like direct with me.
yeah.
um, Another time I received feedback that really, I would say, like changed me as a leader
Hmm.
was when I was a principal. I would send out a anonymous survey link to like any feedback for me in in my weekly newsletters. So they would just go out. It was like every Sunday night to my whole team with like updates on data and whatnot. And so whoever wanted to give me anonymous feedback could. So I do think like that was it, at first it was like kind of scary every time I'd open it. I'd be like, oh no, what is someone giving me feedback on that
Uh-huh.
they don't want
Yeah.
to put out? But I also think like you're giving a space to be heard. And so one of the things that I did get a lot of feedback, and most of it was so useful, but I would say one sticks out to me, and it's I think every leader can probably relate in some way to this, but the feedback was that I didn't say hello to them when they walked by, like they walked by me in the morning. I didn't
Mm.
like greet them, and that like really threw them off. They didn't know if I was
Uh-huh.
upset with them and whatnot, and so I feel like something like that could have really like hurt my relationships with people, like something like that where they don't think I care or I'm too busy or whatnot for them. And I really had no recollection of seeing them. I'm probably so in my work and like never
Just in the
wanted.
zone.
Yeah, but how would I have known that and been better about that for pretty much like the rest of my life? It's like when I'm walking by someone, make eye contact and say hello. Like that matters to people. Um, and so like again, that sounds like such a silly little bit of feedback, but it was actually really impactful for me. And I never want anyone to feel like I didn't care about them or that they weren't important enough for me to say good morning. Like that is something, no matter how busy I am, I will make time
Yeah.
for them. So
No, absolutely. And I have something that's very similar. Like, I
yeah.
didn't realize how much my facial expressions kind of mirrored what I was thinking. That whole term "fix your face," like, I am if "fix your face" was a picture in the dictionary, it would have been me early on in my career because I just didn't I'd never been told that before, so I didn't realize how much of my emotion was showing on my face even though I was saying that I was listening and I was agreeing. My face was saying something completely different, and that was a huge one for me. Not that I'm trying to kind of mask what I'm saying, but you
Oh
also
yeah.
have to understand it can be off-putting to people if you are talking to them and you're giving these facial expressions that are like they are hard to read or they seem harsh when they're not. You're just thinking,
Yeah.
and so even something as simple as just fix your face
Yeah.
can go a long way as well. So
Yeah.
I totally can identify with that for sure.
Yeah.
So, how do you think technology has changed feedback, changed the landscape in education in terms of feedback, or what opportunities or challenges has this created?
Yeah. I think, to be honest with you, I think if you would have asked me a few years ago, I think I would have said, this is not great. Like, we are, not, we're using, there's too many barriers between us and the person, and we're giving, whether we're receiving or giving that feedback to them like via email, it's not as personal. And like, I would have come up with all these other reasons why I didn't like it. But I actually think that it is like my mindset's changed around it. And I do think there are a lot of opportunities for us to give feedback.
Mm,
In, with tech, like through technology. I also think just like having a second to think about that feedback, make sure it's really clear. And I think technology again gives us that like ability, whether that again is like a form that you are sending out to people or whatnot.
Hmm.
Um, but I think that again, you can also give really timely feedback, and there's like apps and obviously messaging and all of that that you can give someone like really clear, crisp, documented feedback in a way that's like, right there in front of them in the moment. And so
Yeah,
just, things I've seen in schools obviously that's been helpful. But yeah, yeah, I'm also really excited to hear about what other people have been doing as well. Um, but yeah, I do think it's as long as you're intentional about it, it can really give you more opportunities than not.
absolutely. And so, in your experience, what's the single most important element that transforms feedback from something feared into something valued within a community?
Ooh.
And I will jump in and say, sorry, not to interrupt you, but
Uh,
one of the things you said is that the culture around it is super important.
yeah,
But is there anything else that you think might be important as well?
yeah. I'm trying to think of the word. The the intention behind it.
Mm, yep,
I think that
that's
is
great.
as much as we don't think that is is as important as it is. Like you think about it, if you've ever given feedback that wasn't received well, and you've checked yourself and said, why wasn't that received well, and whatever, if you're not just like again thinking it's all of the other person, if you're reflecting on how you delivered it, it most likely is coming from a place of like your intention behind it
Yeah.
may not have been like as wonderful as you thought it would be, and like thinking through that, um, I think is really important as well. And then again, I do think the culture. I think about sports a lot when I think of feedback, and like
Hmm.
you never really get to a place in leadership or in your life where you don't receive feedback, or you shouldn't. Like you're never that high up where you just no longer receive feedback. Like I think about like Jordan, like he was always receiving feedback all day, like all day long from
Yep.
his coaches and peers and whatnot. And he was Michael Jordan. Like, are you like just sometimes like, like and I like to use that as something I talk about to teams about is like just the intention behind it, but obviously like no one is too good for it, and
Right.
it's really helping us like grow and learn, and we all need
Absolutely.
it.
And that's what we want to do, grow and
Yeah,
learn, right? We all want to feel like we're growing, we're learning on a
yeah,
regular basis and not kind of stagnant. And so one of the things I said we would circle back around to is what do you do after the feedback is given? So after you've received the feedback, what are the steps? What do you need to do next?
yeah. So I think, well, I guess if it's in person, I always think like if it's something really like, that you're receiving, or even if you're getting in an email, let's just say, I think like pause, take a moment before reacting in any way. Don't start like opening up an email to respond or anything like that, or even just saying something. Like I think just taking a second to read it, reread it, or ask them to maybe repeat it, like just collect your thoughts before responding helps you like stay calm and open minded. And this is something I still do to this day. Um,
Mm,
then it's asking for clarity if it's unclear. Just like, and sometimes you may need an example or something like that. Like, that's fine. We're human, and that's, something that you have the space to do. Making sure you actually understand it, I think, is the next piece. And then finally, when you are reflecting and like considering, like, okay, this feedback has merit. How am I going to use it to grow and improve? And then think about like what are the actual like actions or adjustments I need to make? And sometimes even just having that conversation with someone is helpful as well, so that they can actually also think through, if they haven't already, what would I actually need to do, or adjust before moving forward to implement or turn around this feedback.
yeah, so I was going to say earlier when we were talking, one thing that popped into my head because oftentimes we can get a lot of feedback, especially if it's kind of survey based. If you're doing 360s at your organization and you're getting a lot of feedback, whether it's, kind of freehand response or, kind of check the box in surveys and it's aggregate, there's some things you need to take with a grain of salt. Some things you can't take too personally. You have to realize that this is also a snapshot of some people's day in a particular moment and say felt a particular way. And so you need to be able to kind of sift through the feedback to see what is actually helpful and actionable and what you just kind of have to let go. And, it's easier said than done. And I'm going to admit, like, you get the 5 compliments. Oh, you did great. And yeah, you can improve in this in just a little bit. But that one kind of nagging thing that you're like, I never did that. Or, that's not true. That's the one thing that people generally hold on to
Yep.
instead of really kind of taking the aggregate feedback and saying, on the whole, like on balance, you are doing a great job in these particular areas. We just need you to kind of tweak in some other spaces, or and do some things in a slightly different way. And then you have the, like, I hate everything you do and you're no good, and that's what we
Yeah.
generally hold on to, because that's that gets the headline. That's the sensational part, and that's the part that kind of really pierces us, right? And gets us, could be a little emotional, or could be just upset, or just fill in the blank. And we have to, especially in leadership position, you've got to learn to let some of that roll off your back. Like, you can't, like, hold on to that and kind of operate in that space. You've got to know when the feedback is good and when the feedback needs to be tossed, and that is hard to do often on your own. And so having someone that you can kind of talk to and bounce things off of and say, oh yeah, you need to just let that go, is super helpful too.
No, absolutely. Yes. There's been a few times where you have to like talk through it, sift through it. Does this have merit? Does it not? And yeah,
Yeah.
like you said, also like the time of the year, the
Yep.
like time of the day you give the survey, like don't be giving people, they've been at school or work for 12 hours and now they're getting a survey. Like, yeah. So just be, I think that's really, really true. Yeah. Yeah. And that just, again, yeah, that emotional intelligence comes into play of like, you know, I want this to be something that helps me grow. And if the feedback's not something that can help you grow.
Yep, and if it's not factual, it's not based in
Yeah.
fact, and if it's not helpful in a way that, again, helping you to, it's critical in a way that helps.
Yes.
There's sometimes people are critical for being. I can't talk today. I'm not sure what's going on. Critical for just being critical. They just want to be critical for the sake of
Yes.
being critical, and that's
Mhm.
that's not helpful at all. And so, being able to sift through that is important. Again, such an important conversation to have, Aubrey, and I thank you so much for taking the time today, because again, everyone needs to be giving and receiving feedback in some form or fashion, whether it's personal or professional, right? You want to receive feedback in your personal life too, right? If you're talking about loading the dishwasher the wrong way, I've talked about having to let that go with my partner, but I haven't quite done that yet.
Same, actually.
I digress.
Yes.
But anywho, I think it's just super important for us to be more open to receiving feedback in all areas. I think it helps for richer conversations, richer relationships. It helps us to be better people. And so, in closing, like, what are 3 takeaways you would want people to kind of think about as they kind of enter into this kind of giving and receiving feedback season?
Yeah. I think the first one is to think of the intent, whether you're giving or like receiving feedback, like just to stop for a second and like, what is the intent behind the feedback? I think that's, you know, huge, and how you're, going through it. I think also just like having a plan
Mm,
for the feedback and what that looks like, and building it into a structure, I think is, if it can be done, it should be done. There should be some sort of organizational structure, some sort of protocol that just doesn't feel like every time you sit down and have a formal conversation, that's the first time that person's hearing that or whatnot. Like, it's a regular, like frequent thing that makes people feel comfortable. So it's planned for. And then the third thing is um, intent, having like thinking through it, and maybe I'll say like the mindset. Or no, I feel like that's intent. Hmm.
so maybe the consistency, creating a culture. of feedback. We've said that several times. I think is also
Yeah.
super important in making sure that that we are trying to be across the organization consistent in the way that you give the feedback. You're not giving everyone the same feedback, but the structure and how you are telling your other managers to give and receive feedback is also important as well, I would think.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I think like, yeah, I was thinking um, I think maybe my third one would be model it.
Okay.
So that's like, when you're visibly seeking feedback, when you're acting on feedback, and like it sets the tone for, the organization.
Yep.
And so I think that that's like in that spirit of continuous improvement. I think modeling that is
Yeah, you
huge.
got to walk the talk.
Yes, yes, 100%.
Absolutely. I love that. And so, thanks so much again, Aubrey. It was awesome having you on. And we were talking today about feedback, the F word that no one really likes to really talk about. That's not necessarily negative or it's not a bad word. And so we want to make sure that we are um, doing that on a regular basis. And so, so good to have you. So good to see you again. Hopefully, you will be a repeat guest
Yeah.
on the podcast. We welcome you. And as we close today, I just want to take a moment to remind everyone that registration is now open for the Dean's Roundtable Annual Conference. The conference will be held June 23rd through 26th on the campus of the New England Innovation Academy. And we have an exciting lineup of speakers, and we hope to see you there. And as always, thanks for spending time with us on the Dean's Roundtable podcast.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Dean's Roundtable podcast series. For those of you leading the charge in student life, if you're ready to rediscover what made you fall in love with this work in the first place, join us at the Dean's Roundtable Annual Conference. During these 4 transformative days, you'll connect with fellow deans, share game-changing ideas, and walk away with practical strategies you can use right now. Head to deansroundtable.org to learn more, and if you enjoyed today's conversation, be sure to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. Today's episode was hosted by Bridget Johnson in conversation with Aubrey Tripto, produced and edited by Andrick Sigmund, and music by PremiumBeat.com. For any questions, contact information can be found in the episode description. And, as always, thanks again for listening.